Iswail and the Kwes'Kwestin meets up Quitwilam. That's na to Musqueam of Tamas Turnahuil, Equinishqualwin, Quitsni, Quitsnala. My name is Kwes'Kwestin, James Q. You're most warmly welcome to Musqueam's sacred land. My nation has sent me to welcome the Institute on Governance to our unsurrendered land with this welcome, and we would like to include and acknowledge our brothers and sisters from Squamish and our kin from Tsleil-Waututh. We are honored that your organization has taken on responsibility for change within Canada, and we are honored that you will do so from within the heart of our territory. For more than 20 years, Musqueam has sought to formalize our relationship with our neighbor Canada, and for more than 20 years, we have been denied this respect. Canada is a new nation with a culture and identity in evolution. Musqueam is a nation of antiquity with an ancient culture and identity. This year, Canada celebrates their sesquicentennial, their 150th anniversary. Our Snuayat, our hereditary law, recalls our displacement by the ice during the winter without end. Our nation bridges the passage from the Ice Age to global warming, from the Pleistocene, almost 120,000 years ago, to now, the late Holocene. A national identity much, much, much older than Canada. And where Canada struggles to birth a national identity as they emerge from the colonial legacy of the British, Musqueam struggles to recover from the failed genocide of that same colonial campaign that founded Canada. And whereas the Canadian search for a national identity poses a quandary of how to bridge a political transition, Musqueam struggles to continue a cultural transition that bridges geological epochs. Our Snuayat tells us that our first lawgiver, Chals, came here from the southeast long ago. It's said that when Chals first walked amongst the Musqueam, Tawasin was an island. And when I went to college, I learned that that was 9,000 years ago. There are other ancient nations on this earth. The dreamlines of the Barapa in Australia recollect volcanic eruptions that can be dated to 10,000 years ago. And they reference their ancestors' first journeys in Australia almost 50,000 years ago. The Torah, the Vedas, and Buddhism are perhaps 2,500 years old. Christianity, 2,000 years old. Islam, 1,400 years old. Canada, 150 years. Through the thousands of generations of our ancestors who have given modern Musqueam our sacred obligations to this land, we've seen the landforms come and go. We've seen the climax vegetation come and go. We've seen the mountains rise and crumble. We've seen the stars shift in the heavens. We've seen the birth of the modern landform rise from beneath the ocean, a landform that seems so permanent to industrial eyes. This whole time, we have known and respected our sacred duties to the land that we walk on. It is our obligation. It is our law. Earlier this summer, Jody Wilson-Raybould told Assembly First Nation meeting that her government would not directly adopt the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People into law, but rather implement it through consultation. On September 7th, 2016, she told an annual gathering of BC Cabinet ministers and First Nation leaders, surely many of you here were there then, that it's important to appreciate why Canada cannot simply incorporate the declaration word for word into law. I would add to her advice the caution that it is important to appreciate that Musqueam cannot abandon 100,000 years of Snuayat, of direct teaching of our heritage. Our honor forbids that we compliantly substantiate the illusion that Canada respects and maintains internationally accepted standards of human rights. Therefore, it is for Canada to prove by their actions that they respect and maintain international standards of human rights. And that is why we welcome you here today. We respect the change that you bring. The history between the nations of Canada and Musqueam has been a history of 150 years of accommodation by Musqueam. We can change no more. It is time for Canada to change. Blood quantum race law, enshrined in the Indian Act, is current Canadian law. Blood quantum race law, enshrined by the National Socialist Party in Germany, was displaced more than 60 years ago by force of arms. Blood quantum race law was displaced in South Africa more than 20 years ago by democracy and the party system. No Allied armada will storm Jericho Beach to liberate Musqueam. Canada has had democracy and the party system for 150 years, but Canada has used these gifts to implement, not to repeal, blood quantum race law. It is only by individual acts of reconciliation that individual Canadians and their paradigm will shift. And only if the collective mass of individual Canadians genuinely committed to international values of human rights reaches the tipping point, only then will Canada repeal their commitment to institutionalized racism. By withdrawing their national endorsement of blood quantum race law, maintained by the quiet, complacent consent of individuals. For these reasons, I offer you a gift from Musqueam, our blessing. I offer to share with you from our spiritual law, from our ancient culture, two teachings. First, I'd like to talk to you about the soul canoe. From Northern California to Southern Alaska, before contact with industrial culture, all the nations believed in the soul canoe. For those of you unfamiliar with it, think of it as a metaphor. Your soul, your immortal soul, travels through this life and the next in a canoe. And you're alone in that canoe to choose your course, to choose your decisions, to choose what you take with you to help you make those decisions. When a group of people gather like this with one common goal, with a common interest, it is our teaching that you create a beach where each individual can rest their soul canoe. And when you're on this beach with your people, you can share your words, and your words are gifts to one another that will help each other in the journey of your soul canoe. My words to you are a gift through the story of the soul canoe. With our people, a gift like this, these kind of words, they're a form of prayer offered as a blessing to you. May these words help your journey. May they steer your soul canoe. May your individual decisions be wise. May your soul see far. I've told you of Charles, our first lawgiver. I'll tell you now of Kwes'Kwestin, my older brother, carries that name. This is his story. Kwes'Kwestin was our leader when our brothers and sisters from Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh were one with us. We were one family. Would have been about 1800. The fur traders set quotas on the west coast, and they traded muskets for sea otter pelts. And if the villages there couldn't meet their quotas, they were bombarded. So those people went further afield to save their own families. And they came into our territory. And they came armed with muskets, and we had none. And our ancestor, Kwes'Kwestin, restored our boundaries without muskets. He did it by ambush. He did it by night fighting. He did it by knowing the tides. And when he was an old man, older than me, almost as old as my brother, he was picking blackberries on the beach below Kalachan. If you know UBC, where Marine Drive and Agronomy Road intersect, we had a fort there, Kalachan. It's collapsed as the cliffs recede, but it's the same setup. There was a ravine then, just as there is now. There was a little redoubt, a little fort there. Kwes'Kwestin was picking blackberries with his youngest wives on the beach, and the children, the little children. It was in the fall. Heavy fog lay on the water. Slave raiders came out of that fog, and what they saw was an old man and some women and children. They thought it was easy pickings. So Kwes'Kwestin sent his family to the redoubt to get the militia. He knew that if they all ran, they would all be caught. And he went in himself to the water, and he caught the bow of that canoe, and he flipped it, and he disarmed their bowman. Traditionally, their second best man. He was an old man. And he fought with the weapon he took, and he retreated out of the water up the beach. And as he fought, he sang his death song. And our ancestors heard that song. And for 200 years, that song has been our law. Before our council was sworn in this term, the warrior song was sung to them. So I share this story so those of you unfamiliar with my nation will know a little bit more about us. You'll know that we hold our law. You'll know that our law is ancient. And you'll know that we're sincere when we say, we welcome you here to bring change. And we thank you for that.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming to participate in the Institute on Governance second installment of the dialogue series, Characteristics of a Nation-to-Nation Relationship, co-hosted with Canadians for a New Partnership. Thank you, Elder, for welcoming us to your traditional territory. We appreciate your teachings as they help guide us on how to respectfully move forward on a nation-to-nation relationship. I too would like to recognize and pay respect to the fact that we're holding this dialogue on the traditional territories of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. That's almost as easy to say as sesquicentennial. But you did well on both. I know you used to be my friends from Burrard. I'm catching up. I'm catching up with the times. We believe that it's important at this time to note that Vancouver City Council has also voted unanimously to formally recognize that this city was founded on your traditional territory and that these territories were never ceded by your nations. The Prime Minister's commitment to pursuing a nation-to-nation relationship based on recognition, rights, respect, cooperation and partnership with Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Métis and Inuit, invites the opportunity for thoughtful reflection and discussion on the path forward. This acknowledges that a new relationship may indeed be a precondition, but certainly a condition for reconciliation, and a path towards helping a whole country recognize our histories and our common and certainly better future. The IOG believes that in addition to governmental discussions, all Canadians must have the opportunity to share this vision in an open forum and to help direct the agenda moving forward. By convening the kinds of experts and facilitating the exchange of knowledge that this session brings us, this dialogue series aims to bring to the forefront systemic governance challenges that have indeed impeded the advancement in this important relationship building to date. We are seeking to articulate the characteristics of a nation-to-nation relationship as defined by Indigenous leaders and governments, as well as to identify key issues, challenges, and opportunities moving forward. Recognizing the opportunities this moment in history may present us, the IOG, along with our partners, are organizing this 5-part dialogue series, Characteristics of a Nation-to-Nation Relationship. The series is being held across Canada, bringing together experts to facilitate the exchange of knowledge, focusing on 4 themes central to the relationship. The first dialogue, Nation Building and Nation Rebuilding, was held in Ottawa in February of this year, with well over 100 participants, including Indigenous leadership and federal government representatives, including Carolyn Bennett. Participants emphasized that it's important to recognize that we are in a process of taking stock and assessing what the landscape actually looks like today. Participants and panelists talked about the importance of the Two-Row Wampum Treaty as being a clear articulation of the relationship as it should have been between Indigenous and non-Indigenous nations. The 2 rows of purple wampum beads on a background of white represent 2 nations going down a river together, but in 2 separate boats. Each nation respecting each other's governments, each other's way of life, each other's spiritual ways, customs, and traditions. As well in Ottawa, Métis President Clément Chartier spoke about self-determination as being a fundamental component of a renewed relationship, and that the Métis have the right to define themselves and their citizenship. Ontario Regional Chief Isidore Day noted that there are many good starting points for the discussion, this dialogue, and the new directions, such as the fundamental work and the foundational work of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. All leaders noted that in order to move forward, Indigenous nations need recognition from the majority of society as well as from Canada. Minister Bennett spoke passionately about institution building being the underpinning of evolving these relationships. Recordings of the dialogue, as well as the interviews with participating thought leaders, are located at iog.ca on our website. I'll refer you to the USB keys that were provided to you at registration, which contain the summary report of that dialogue on nation building and rebuilding, as well as the dialogue series general discussion paper. These documents can also be found on our website. I would encourage you all to distribute them widely and read them if you have the time for a fuller overview of our series and these sessions and the way the thinking is evolving on these seminal issues as the sessions unfold. This second installment will focus on the central theme of jurisdiction. Canada's legal and constitutional framework is a fundamental element in redefining and in reshaping the relationship between Canada and Indigenous peoples. As the legal framework has evolved from the Royal Proclamation to Section 35, so too have the nature and expression of modern jurisdictional relationships for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. This can be seen in the judicial assertion of rights as the primary option, which often, unfortunately, leads to lengthy litigation resulting in a legal relationship built on reaction and conflict, not on reconciliation and respect. While the Constitution and legislation have provided opportunities for advancement, there remain huge impediments related to the achievement of self-government, to cooperation. Imagination and political will should not be allowed to fail us this time around. Further foundational changes are required to develop new conceptions of jurisdiction under a renewed nation-to-nation Inuit Crown and Métis government relationship built on trust and respect. Some of the guiding questions for us today and tomorrow are, what lessons can we take from modern assertions of jurisdiction? What are the practical considerations that impact the scope of authority? What types of mechanisms will enable greater control over decision-making and eventually lead to the full realization of Aboriginal self-governance? Which components of self-government should be priorities for nations lacking adequate control over decision-making? What are the implications of a nation-to-nation relationship for the regulatory and legal approval processes? And how does authority and decision-making need to evolve? Those are some of the questions, by no means all of the questions. And finally, while I have this opportunity at the beginning of these 2 days, I'd like to thank all the panelists and participants for coming to Vancouver to participate in this dialogue. We are extremely happy to see the diverse participation for this event. The provincial government has sent their regrets and their regards because given the fact that they're an election campaign, they didn't feel that they could attend in large numbers or officially. Nevertheless, they've expressed in writing their support for a timely series such as this one. We appreciate that many of you have come from great distances and taken valuable time to participate and explore the important characteristics of this nation-to-nation relationship. To address the reality that there are many who would like to attend and participate, but are unable to attend, we have partnered with Nationtalk to videotape both the panels and provide an opportunity for participants to answer questions. These videos will also be shared online to initiate further discussions. I'd also like to remind you, and for you to take note of our next dialogue. It will focus on intergovernmental fiscal relationships, to me as foundational as all these other subjects, and it will be occurring in Toronto at the Chelsea Hotel on June 5th and 6th, and there our co-sponsors, in addition to Canadians for a New Partnership, will also be the Chiefs of Ontario. So stay tuned in the upcoming days. If you want to check our website, you'll see the agenda starting to take shape. Thank you once again for participating in what I'm sure will be a very lively and engaging 2 days. Miles, my friend, thank you.
Thank you, Maryantonett. I want to acknowledge the Musqueam and all the Coast Salish people, as Jim Q on their behalf has again so graciously and generously welcomed us to their unceded sovereign territories. Remember those words, unceded sovereign. They mean that absolutely seriously. And on that basis, welcome you generously to their territories, as I think many of the nations in this province that are in a similar situation do. And the work that we're embarking on here over the next couple of days, I hope and pray will contribute seriously to our coming together. I'm here as a Board of Director member of Canadians for a New Partnership, a group of Canadians who've come together to further that pursuit, also that relationship. And I want to introduce our chairman, who's very committed to reconciliation, to treaty making throughout his whole life, and has been instrumental in establishing Canadians for a New Partnership. I want to introduce Stephen Kwes'Kwestin. Would you stand up, Stephen, over here? Stephen is a past president of the Dene Nation, is a past premier of the Northwest Territories, and over the past couple of years, as Idle No More gained a lot of attention in this country, brought pressure to the issue we're dealing with today, had to answer to his children, a new generation, about what he was doing to further reconciliation, to further resolution of this title dispute. And what Stephen did is phoned around, talked to a bunch of his friends who who happen to be ex-prime ministers and ex-national chiefs and leaders of various nations across the country, and brought them together in Canadians for a New Partnership, and who lay out a vision for reconciliation, but don't do a lot of work on our own. We partner with groups like the IOG and others who have proactive agendas in place and are working to address this issue. And I really want to thank and acknowledge the IOG for the important work that they're doing in this regard. We're meeting today in the context of 2017 being a celebration of 150 years of Canada. It's an important celebration for Canada as a young nation, but it's not much of a celebration for First Nations people. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't acknowledge it and acknowledge its importance. Last week I was at an academic conference in London, England, and the High Commissioner at Canada House in her opening remarks was commenting on Canada 150, and she says, geez, we've got plumbing in this place older than that. So let's keep it in perspective. And even though the past 150 years has been a pretty negative and dark period for relations between the Crown and First Nations, we have the ability to turn that around and make the next 150 years what this first ought to have been, and raise up the level of our humanity by celebrating the very huge commonalities we share and respecting our differences. And if I have one prayer or one hope for this gathering, is that we keep focused on that important task. And looking at the attendance list, we certainly have a lot of experience and a lot of really capable people who will contribute to that over the next couple of days. Also today is the 10th anniversary of the United Nations acceptance or establishment of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And as a lot of our leaders meet at the United Nations in New York, let's keep in mind that framework that's not perfect, but it's an appropriate framework to guide us in building a new relationship, that we recognize each other as peoples in the international sense. We recognize ourselves as human societies who have the right and the authority to affect our own destiny, our right to self-determination. And on that basis, when we come together in places like what we call today Canada, the homeland of many ancient First Nations, that through that framework of recognition and respect, that we can find a way forward where we're sharing and coexisting in a respectful way. That, to me, is the potential of Canada, and that we have the opportunity to realize. I'm really reminded that as we go forward in that quest, let's pay attention to the details of jurisdiction and how we're going to mechanically organize those and manifest those. But it's important to focus on those, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. First of all, we need to reach agreement amongst ourselves as First Nations and Canada on what it is we're doing. on what's the nature of this undertaking, on implementing UNDRIP, on establishing nation-to-nation relationships. You know, I'm with Sophie Pierre and many others in this room. 22 or more years ago, we established the BC Treaty Commission, and I thought we were doing what I'm saying today. But that commitment to a nation-to-nation relationship, which is simply seeing the other side of the table as they see themselves, and committing to living here respectfully together. Now, I know each of us as First Nations can look ourselves in the mirror and feel true to living as who we see ourselves. If Canada did that as a nation state, we wouldn't be having this discussion today. If the Canadian political leaders followed their own law in a country that's founded on the rule of law and justice. You know what I'm talking about, Harry. If that came about, the courts have provided such clear direction, we wouldn't even need to be having this discussion, but we do, and let's keep that in mind as we go forward. So let's establish that fundamental commitment and go forward. Geez, Barry, I'm just getting started. So, no, so let's keep focused on that, and you know, I see federal representatives in here. The province sent their regrets, and the province has been in this province stepping up to the plate a bit through interim agreements, waiting for Canada to come to the table. You know, they've been doing some effort in that regard, but let's find ways to go forward together in building this huge promise of Canada. If there's anywhere in the world we can do this right, it's in Canada. But I want to close by saying to my First Nation relatives and colleagues in here, we're strong enough today that if Canada doesn't make the changes the Prime Minister's talked about in terms of nation to nation, let's lock our shoulders together as First Nations. Let's define our nationhood in a modern way and implement our own jurisdictions. We can do that without being cranky about it. Not everybody's like me. Don't have to be cranky about it all the time. We can do that in a constructive, positive, and powerful way. And I think we must keep ourselves focused on that objective as we go through these discussions. But let's talk about rolling out in the details of a strategy, a detailed strategy on the Crown side and on First Nations side for building this nation-to-nation relationship, which is 150 years overdue. Hawa, thank you.